Opening the Black Box. Part 1. A webcomic. It's July. It's 2020. The world is erupting after the murder of George Floyd, and I'm trapped at home because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm angry and scared and out of side projects to occupy my attention. My friends are too. I haven't slept well in months, and I'm not particularly sure why. It's Saturday evening, and we're finishing up with our weekly Dungeons & Dragons game. We've been playing by voice chat, and each of us has been attending religiously, desperate for human interaction. My wife, B, is cleaning up the detritus of her game night tea. Her shoulders are drooped, and she's shuffling in a way she does when she's really tired. Makes sense. She's been running the game. Most of the others are logging out, too. C posts a link in the text channel of the voice chat. She's openly trans. About a year into her transition, she lost her job a few months ago as the pandemic decimated the food service industry, and she lives with her parents. Her father is deeply transphobic, and her mother can't wrap her head around C's reality. She's almost 30. I'm worried about her, and so is B. We've been trying to help her hold things together for a while now, and nobody's happy with the situation. She'll be moving in with us for a few months shortly, so she can start to get back on her feet. This is really relatable, she says. Yeah? I ask. Looks like a link to a webcomic I haven't read, which isn't surprising. She reads a lot of them. Yeah, she says, with a pause. I think I'm going to go to bed, she adds. It's about 10:10. She doesn't usually get to sleep until the early hours of the morning. I know, and she knows that I know, that it's code for I need to go cry, but I don't know how to comfort her in a way that gets through. She disconnects before I can say anything. I check the link. Real Life Comics, the logo reads, by Greg Dean. You coming to bed? B asks before I can read the first comic. I look up at her and smile. C posted a link to a comic. I want to read it. Maybe it'll help me, I say, not having the heart to speak aloud how helpless I feel. B smiles, radiating soft, warm contentment. Come tuck me in when you're done, she says, and leaves. I watch her go, loving the lazy curl of the hallway light around the swell of her hips, and turn back to the comic. The art is simple, clean, and only one of the 4 panels has any text. It's the reproduction of a tweet, one I'd seen a couple of years ago. If you're under the assumption that you're a cis guy but have always dreamed of being a girl, and the only reason you haven't transitioned is because you're afraid you'll be an ugly girl, that's dysphoria. You're literally a trans girl already, hon. The eyes of the main character of the strip, Greg, I realize, go wide. I nod, half grinning. Yeah, I can see that being quite a thing for someone to realize. I've never wished such a thing, of course. I mean, except for sex stuff, and that doesn't count because sex is weird, obviously. I remember having thought the exact same thing when I read that tweet a couple of years ago. It doesn't strike me as unusual that I'd managed to come across it twice now, given that I don't use Twitter. I move on to the next comic. Now Greg's talking with a version of him that looks like a woman. Next page. Yep, that's the deal, and she's pissed with him. She says she's his core self, and that he's been ignoring her for his whole life. He seems stunned. Makes sense. I think of A or R or K or A or C. The list goes on. The many trans women I've known over the years. Man, that must have been something to figure out. I realize I never really asked any of them about how they figured things out. I heard somewhere that trans folks always knew. I never asked any of them, I realize. Next page. They're talking about Greg's childhood, about how he kept wishing to be a girl. This whole time I just assumed I was weird, Greg says on the 4th panel. I never told anyone about any of this because I thought it was weird, and if anyone found out, they'd hate us. 18 years ago, give or take. My first girlfriend is breaking up with me. D. Her hair is black and short with a radiant smile that comes too rarely. But why? I ask. We'd only been dating for 2.5 weeks. One date, which I screwed up. She looks away. You treat me too well, she said, blushing. Her last boyfriend was abusive, and I suspect worse, but I haven't dared to ask. Too well? I ask, baffled. I'm broken, she says, and it's definitely not the truth, but it's something like the truth. She turns and walks away, and I don't follow her. I just stand there, silent. She rounds a corner. I go to class. 3 years later, we give it another try. It lasts a month and a half, and she leaves me for a woman. I feel disappointed, jealous, an inexplicable sense that I could have been what she needed. Now, I'm not smiling anymore. I've lived that fear for over a decade before B had stumbled into it by accident. But it's just bedroom stuff. Sex is weird, right? Right. My heartbeat has picked up. Next page. My hand is definitely not trembling. 22 years ago, give or take. I'm reading the 5th volume of Ranma 1/2 ravenously. I've just gotten into the manga, and Ranma's my favorite character by far. Awesome martial artist, hilarious martial arts, and will they won't they romantic nonsense. And a main character that changes sex every time they're splashed with water. I ran out of allowance after the 4th volume, so I'm downloading the pages of the 5th volume one by one, which, given that I'm on a dial-up connection, is taking approximately 1 geologic era per page. A thought strikes me. I've been reading video game fanfiction for about a year and a half. Surely there's Ranma fanfiction. Surely. I do a Google search, and not only is there fanfiction, there's mountains of it. A whole mailing list. I crawl through their archive, and one of the first fics I find is called Girl Days. The summary says it's a story about how Ranma has to stay a girl because reasons. It's over 100,000 words long in total. I'm 14. 3 days later, I finished it. The week after, I sneak into the school's computer lab to print the whole thing off so I can read it again and again. I find the next fic, and the next one. Ranma gets trapped in girl form over and over, and I don't go back to reading the actual manga for years. Now, Greg's trying to justify not knowing. Panel 1, Panel 2, yeah, trans lesbians are a thing. I know this already. Pretty much all the trans women I know were or are in lesbian relationships, and that has never once struck me as unusual. Panel 3. I like dude stuff, kinda. I drive a truck, and I like building things and drinking beer and all that, Greg says. I freeze. I don't even like as much guy stuff as Greg lists. Woodworking? Really? Gaming? I've been proud and very happy that it's becoming more unisex, more welcoming to women. All of my recent Dungeons & Dragons groups have been majority women. I hang out with the girls at board game nights. I like cute little cars instead of loud and impressive ones, and cozy romantic nights with B. I don't even like beer. I've never been drunk or high in my life. I've got an irrational fear of intoxication, and I lie constantly to explain why I can't or won't indulge. I know that things come out when you're intoxicated, and some part of me knows that I cannot let this happen. I don't know why. Yes, his female self says, because we like those things. There's nothing inherently male about any of that crap. It's just stuff. I don't give a crap about dresses either. That doesn't mean anything. Wham, 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 wham. My heart is hammering in my chest, powering blood and oxygen into my veins. A panic reaction, I know. It's the only motion in any part of my body, and it's strong enough to make my whole torso quiver with its force. My mouth hangs open, and my thoughts have come to a crashing, catastrophic halt. Because so far as I know, liking those things are what makes you a guy, and if not, then what the hell does? The next page loads. I didn't notice clicking the button. Toxic masculinity. Yeah, this I know. I've lost track of how many times I've apologized for typical guys. Felt utterly and completely mortified to be anything at all like them. Next page. They talk about being young. They talk about watching Ace Ventura over and over. The bottom of my stomach drops out. I did too. Over and over and over. My brother and I loved it. Wham, 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 wham. My mind wanders. Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde. Cheesy garbage from the 90s where a doctor accidentally turns into an evil woman version of himself. Over and over. As the show progresses, he realizes that she's taking over. And soon he'll be her all the time. I must have rented it dozens of times. I never watched the ending, but the transformation sequences? I'm surprised I didn't burn out the tape. Rainbow Bright. Mom recorded it off of TV at some point, and I did wear that tape out. I remember daydreaming about her as my parents drove me to and then from my first in-person baseball game. I don't remember a thing about that game. I just remember thinking about how pretty her dress was. Wham, 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 wham. Next page. More toxic masculinity. Don't care. Next page. I need to know what's next. She challenges him to name her. Says he uses it all the time. He knows. He knows she's called May. Wham, 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 wham. How long have I been daydreaming about names for potential daughters? Never sons, mind you, and I really, really don't want to have kids anyway. Just daughters. Athena, Diana, Jade, Zoe. Zoe, 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 Zoe. Zoe has been rattling around in my head since I could remember. Since I was tiny, and I have no idea where my awareness of that name even came from. What the hell is going on? Wham, 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 wham. My heart is thundering out of control, and it feels like it's about to explode, and... Next page. I'm terrified. My heart is hammering, screaming at me that something is not right. Jesus Christ. They're talking about Ranma. They're talking about Ranma, about managing the sex change curse by just staying in girl form because it's the easiest one to trigger. And I had the exact same thought so many goddamn times, and I even wrote my own fucking fanfiction about it. And May goes ahead and says it. That's not a thing that cis people think. Wham, 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 wham. Next page. I couldn't stop if I wanted to now. Dysphoria. May says, is when you wonder why you look in the mirror and don't give a crap about your appearance. You don't identify with yourself. She even teases Greg for never changing his hairstyle. I started growing my hair out just after my 13th birthday. I've worn it in a ponytail for 22 years with no changes at all. The idea of cutting it short has always been appalling to me, and I only have one outfit. A fair number of variations, but only one outfit, really. Clean jeans and a tee-cut shirt. I don't like how it looks, I just hate how everything else looks on me. Not like the gorgeous edge-printed skirts girls get to wear, or the fashionably cut blouses, the lovely retro A-line dresses that I bought for B, or... Oh shit. Oh shit! Wham, 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 wham. Next page. Greg's already accepted it all. They're talking about coming out now. I cannot handle that thought right now. The world has ceased to exist outside of this comic. Next page. May says go to Reddit for help. Next page. They embrace. Blue shirt to blue cardigan. He fades. He disappears. It's just her. It's just May now. And at the bottom of the comic, the byline has changed. May Dean. This was autobiographical. Wham, 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 wham. I slam back into my body. My computer's off, but I don't remember shutting it down. I stand up. I sit back down. I sit there. The need to do something burning inside me like the shining, radiant, white-hot heart of the sun itself. But I don't know what. It's 11 o'clock. When did it get that late? I've been up here alone for almost an hour. I stand up again. I walk to the kitchen. The sink's full of dirty dishes. I grab the glass I used for the game tonight. How long ago? A decade? A century? I pour some lemonade. I drink deep and then pause for breath. My heart's still hammering. I tried to hold still. My pulse is still strong enough to send rhythmic ripples across the pale surface of the lemonade. I pour it down the drain and manage not to break the glass when I slam it down on the counter, needing to remove the evidence of my distress. I can barely handle my panic without proof of its intensity right there in my hand. I cannot remember ever feeling this alive or terrified in my life. I walk back to the office. I stand there in the darkened room, worn beige carpet underfoot, computers waiting, silent. I stand there. I turn. I leave. Wham, 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 wham. My brain will not re-engage. I can't get the first thought together for anything, no matter how small. I realize I'm walking toward the bedroom, habit finally kickstarting something in me. I let it go. It's pitch black, but I don't bother with lights. B is asleep. I hesitate, wanting to wake her, to beg for comfort, to ask for help, but for what? I don't know what. The panicking part of me screams that's a lie, and I know exactly what it is, what it's always been, what it cannot be anything other than. I don't wake her. I can't bear the thought of speaking this terror out loud, to give it form and force and power, to make it a real thing that's really happening, because once I name it, I can't ignore it anymore. That line, I realize dazedly, is straight out of Dreadnought, a book about a trans superhero, a book I've read 6 times in the last 2.5 years. I very pointedly do not think about that any further. I strip, and I lie down. Wham, 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 wham. An hour later, I get up and take 2 sleeping pills. An hour after that, I finally fall asleep. My pulse is still racing. 5 hours after that, I'm awake again. Wham, 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 wham. My heart hasn't slowed in the least. All through the night. With a slight quiet of sleep, my mind has had a chance to start itself back up, to begin ramping into the opening trickles of thought it needs to operate, but now things are worse. Pulsing in time to my thundering, raging heartbeat is a new thought, screaming in my mind, intrusive and inescapable. Trans, 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 trans.